It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. We're listening to some of my favorite Bullseye interviews of all time. Next up, Lily Tomlin, one of the absolute greats of American comedy. She's got 2 Tonys, 6 Emmys, 2 Peabodys, a Grammy, and she was nominated for an Oscar. In 2003, she won the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor. It is a pretty solid list. She's worked in TV on shows like Laugh-In and The West Wing and films like Nashville and Flirting with Disaster, and on stage in acclaimed works like The Search for Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe, which was written by her life and creative partner of almost 45 years, Jane Wagner. These days, she's starring on the Netflix show, Grace and Frankie. It's entering its 4th season next year, and Lily just got her 3rd Emmy nomination for her role in it. When I talked with her in 2013, she was promoting her film Admission. In it, she played Tina Fey's free-spirited second-wave feminist mother, a woman who chops her own wood, fixes her own bike, and has a big tattoo of Bella Abzug on her bicep. In this scene from the movie, Tina Fey's character, Portia, has just let herself into her mom's house a little unexpectedly.
Mom? It's me!
Who?
How many people call you Mom?
Why didn't you tell me you were coming?
I left a message. I was visiting a school nearby.
I never check my messages.
That's good policy. Thought I'd spend the night if it's all right with you. I've got to get up very early and then hit a few schools and race back for Mark's department lunch.
How can you stand those English department gatherings? What could be more dull?
Sometimes you make sacrifices for the person you've been living with for 10 years. That's what a healthy relationship is, Mom.
Thank God I'm not in one of those.
Yes, thank God.
If I had to do what I'm supposed to be doing every minute of my life like you do, I'd kill myself.
Did you just say if you were me, you would kill yourself?
Portia, don't exaggerate.
Lily Tomlin, welcome to Bullseye. It's really great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Jesse. Nice to be here.
So I want to start by asking you about the Bella Abzug tattoo. Was that in the script? Where did that come into this process?
Well, initially I had, because my character has had a double mastectomy, I originally wanted to make a breastplate, as if I had a mastectomy, and tattoo that. Huge, elaborate tattoo. And then I was going to try to persuade the director to let me be chopping wood shirtless in the yard. Well, I couldn't. Getting a breastplate done and everything I was short on time, so I settled in my mind for a Bella tattoo.
I read somewhere, and this was stunning to me, left me gobsmacked, that you were a cheerleader? Mm-hmm. When were you a cheerleader?
High school. That would be in the 50s, in the mid-late 50s, like 55, 56, 57. And I was the captain. I was a co-captain, really.
Really?
Oh, yeah. But I went to a very soulful high school, a high school that, it would be embarrassing if like an all-white school cheered against us because they would be so square and so rah-rah. And, of course, we were way down. We really got down and rocked the basketball court.
For example?
Well, just, we just did soulful cheers. Like, we'd, let's go, Cass Tech, let's go, bump, bump. Let's go, Cass Tech, let's go, bump, bump. Off the floor and out the door. Let's go, Cass Tech, let's go. And our most famous cheer was Touchy Touch.
Well, how does Touchity Touch go?
Well, it goes, well, ladies and gentlemen and students too. Well, here's a little cheer we're going to give to you. Hands up, touch-to touch, a touch-to touch. Like that.
That's the best thing that's happened to me since I got Jim Lair to call out bus stations like he used to do in his old job as a bus station announcer. What was your family like when you were a kid?
Well, my mother and dad are both Southern. They're from Kentucky. And my dad was a factory worker, and my mom didn't work till I was about 12, and she got a job as a nurse's aide. So they were blue collar. I went to Kentucky every summer, and the rest of the year I lived in inner city Detroit in a predominantly black neighborhood. And then I'd go to Kentucky, and it would be like, real culture clash, culture change. Culture shock is the word, isn't it?
What about it? What was different?
Well, everything from the racially, how people behaved. And it was diametrically opposite, going to rural Kentucky in the 40s and 50s and going and living in inner city Detroit. And also on a farm, you get to see animals copulating and things like that. You didn't see a lot of that in Detroit. I mean, on the street.
When did you decide that you actually could pursue a life as an artist, and that could be your life?
I think when I probably realized that I tried to be I at one point in college I enrolled in pre-med, but I could never have been a doctor, and I would not have had the brain for it at all. I think that was one awakening point where I thought, oh God, I can't do this. All the stuff that's demanded, mathematically and computing all these things, and it just wasn't up my alley. So I got into a college show. I mean, I'd always put on shows all my life as a kid, but didn't think that's what people did to make a living. I was a blue-collar kid. It just doesn't dawn on you that that's something that people actually do and get away with, and earn a living. So but when I got in this college show, I was such a hit. People just were carrying on so much. I said, when midterms were over, I said, I'm going to go to New York and try to be an actor.
I mean, that is a grand vision based on a successful college review sketch.
Well, I hate to say it, Jesse, but I just felt like I was born to it. As I was sitting up there on stage, I thought, well, this is just so much fun. I don't know why I didn't do this before.
Let's talk a little bit about the very start of your acting career in the mid '60s in New York, and I actually have a clip of a commercial, and this commercial doesn't need that much setting up, other than to say that it's just you on screen. You look spectacular, by the way. And the screen is filling with water and agitating, not unlike a washing machine.
On how to get rid of dirty stains and put dazzle where the stain was. I use New All now with bleach, borax, and brighteners. Watch. The bleach and borax lift out the stains. Brighteners splash on dazzle.
That was quite a hard commercial because they, like 300 gallons of water would rush in like a second, like 1 second or 2 seconds.
You were really underwater?
I wasn't under. I was up to my neck.
Well, yeah. No, I saw the commercial. I assumed that it was some sort of visual effect.
No. Well, taking the stains was a visual effect, and that they had to take it off the air eventually because it was considered untruthful. Because I agitated my upper body in this big tank of water. You didn't know I was in the tank at first.
Was the water cold?
Yeah, it was cold, and it took days to shoot because they tried everything, cement booties, because it would knock me over.
You kept floating?
No, it would it would not. The water was so rushed and so big, it would knock you over. So like the first day, it just kept knocking me, and then I'd have to dry me off and redo my hair, and all that stuff.
It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My guest this week is the legend, Lily Tomlin. We talked in 2013. What was that? Was that one of the first big professional gigs that you booked?
Oh yeah, I think the actual first one was a Vicks Vapor Rub. That commercial changed my life because I had that was '66, and I had been hired onto the a return of the Gary Moore show. Gary Moore was making a comeback on CBS, and I only did 3 episodes, and they fired me. And then, so I went back to typing.
Why did you get fired?
Oh, probably because I was sort of combative about material. I mean, I wasn't combative in a hateful way. I'd say, no, we can't do this. This is too old-fashioned, or I just didn't think it was funny or hip or anything.
You actually got offered a part on Laugh-In, which was by the time you were offered the part was already a big, huge national hit.
Right. And
turned it down because you wanted to take a hipper job, right?
Yeah, I wanted a music scene. I took music scene on ABC, which was like a contemporary hit parade, whereby there was a band of kids, 5 or 6 kids. David Steinberg was the leader, and he was already sort of known. And we were supposed to do comedy and introduce the songs, but we had concerts with Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin.
I just watched one with Sly and the Family Stone. It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
It was a real concert. It wasn't a lip sync either.
No, it was great. We thought we were just really hot stuff, and the show was. But parents, they didn't. This was 19. What did I say? Now wait a minute.
This is like 1969, I think.
Yeah, that's 69. Because then I went to Laugh-In. The offer was still there, so I went to Laugh-In mid-season because Music Scene got taken off the air.
I want to play a clip from Music Scene, and this is a character that I if I'm not mistaken, you did in your audition for Laugh-In. It's called Lucille the Rubber Freak.
Yeah, but I'm not doing it in character. The Music Scene didn't want me to do character because they said people won't know who you are. In those days, if people did multiple characters, they said the audience gets confused. So I had to kind of do it as myself.
Well, I think it's pretty hilarious. So
yeah, well, it's a good bit.
Let's take a listen.
Hi, my name is Lily Tomlin. I'm a rubber freak. I can say it now. Of course, there was a time when I couldn't. When I look back on it all, I think it started with rubber bands. I wasn't actually swallowing them in those days. I just sort of munched on them. Sometimes I'd take one and stretch it from one eye tooth to the other and sort of twang it. I told myself I was being creative. It was just a relaxing pastime. Then one day I sat down to write a lyric for one especially good tune I twanged.
That's a really hilarious bit. I think ahead of its time in its parody of the confessional.
Yeah.
When you went to Laugh-In, Laugh-In is an interesting show in the history of comedy because it is a really interesting mix of this kind of new thing that was going on, because it was, when you went there, it was 1969, and like the most old-fashioned thing that could possibly exist. Everything is psychedelic flowers and being silly, but on the other hand, it feels like a vaudeville act.
Yeah.
But what did you think of the show when you started on it?
Well, I was probably full of myself, so I couldn't say that was too cool. But because I had a decided sensibility, comedy sensibility that you couldn't push me off of. It's like I could easily reject something because it was just I would be embarrassed to do it. If it made me laugh, if it was interesting to me, that would be the watermark. But I wanted it to be about something. I wanted it to be, satirical or have something to say about something, or be moving about something, or just outrageously funny. Like the Rubber Freak was, for me, all the controversy about what's addictive and what's an acceptable addiction and what isn't, and even so far as what's an acceptable sexual orientation. Because she says at the end, I'm no longer a woman obsessed with an unnatural craving. I'm just another normal, socially acceptable alcoholic. So it was a wonderful turn on the confessional and so on. But I felt it had other stuff too.
I want to play a clip from you on Laugh-In, and your character Ernestine was an immediate smash monster hit.
Yeah, she
on
was.
The show. She is a telephone operator, and in this sketch, she is calling a customer who has unpaid bills.
Ringy-dingy. To ringy-ding. Oh, a gracious good afternoon, Mr. Beadle. I'm Miss Tomlin, your representative from the telephone company. And you owe us a balance of $23.64. When may we expect payment? It's for 3 calls to Topeka, Kansas. You don't know anyone in Topeka, Kansas? Well, Mr. Beadle, that's beside the point. Now, when may we expect payment? When what freezes over? No, Mr. Beadle, you are not dealing with just anyone's fool. I am a high school graduate.
What was it like? I know you were in production on the show for a while before.
Yeah, I went in. I started, I guess, like in October, and then I didn't air until the last show of December.
So what was it like when that happened, and then all of a sudden you were like a famous person?
Yeah, well, Ernestine was famous at least. It was. You don't quite relate to it. You don't quite get it. It aired on a Monday night. I was in New York because I was there doing publicity for my entrance into the show, and Monday night it aired, and I saw it, and first I thought, oh, Ernestine's too big. She's too broad. And then I kept watching. I thought, no. I said, no. There's something about her that really works. There's something real about her. And then I went to the theater the next night, so I wasn't anywhere near friends or anything, and we didn't have email and stuff like that, and I was in a hotel, so I didn't really get phone calls that I can recall. But the next night at the theater, I'm waiting outside for some friends to come, and I know people start walking up and down past me and looking, and decidedly looking at me, and it was so uncomfortable, and I thought, oh, my God. And then I began to... So I didn't want to have to deal with it because I thought it was just too embarrassing. But gradually over to then people they'd be so disappointed if you said it's not me, that you start to just embrace it. You know, and my mother got such a kick out of it. And my dad particularly, and he died shortly after that. He died in 1970. So, but he was so tickled when I was on Laugh-In because it was such a big show, and he just really enjoyed it. You know, he'd tell everybody, who do you think this is? And people would say, well, I guess it's your daughter. And he'd say, yeah, you're damn right. We were at a place, they were living in Fort Wayne, Indiana then, and we went to a place to have dinner, you know, like just a tavern-like kind of place. And my dad, and there was a boy and a girl playing piano and singing. They had come up from Chicago or something, or down from Chicago, and they were coming over saying, "Is there anything we can play for you, Miss Tomlin?" And my dad say, "Son, do you know Froggy went a courtin'?" And then he says, and the voice says, "I don't know that song." My father goes, "Froggy won a courtin', hum." So then my dad says, "Babe, get up and sing a song." And I said, "Daddy, please don't make me sing." He said, "Baby, you got to get up and sing a song for the people." And I said, "Daddy, I can't do it. Don't make me sing." And he says, "Babe, you got to learn how to be popular." And he knew more about it than I did.
I think for a lot of people that I talk to, there is really like a powerful moment in whatever is the thing that they do that means something to their parents. Like they will often have been working for 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes even have been successful. But then when they do something that their parents get, it's a very powerful affirmation of
somehow
this life
that's
they've
the
chosen.
moment that's the moment of your being catapulted into something recognizable. Like a lot of my family who are all from Kentucky, they didn't really kind of acknowledge me overly until I did the Glenn Campbell show. I guest starred on Glenn Campbell, and then they were just all over the moon.
Let's take a listen to one more character from Laugh-In. This is Edith Ann. She's a 5.5-year-old, and I think folks who know the character will immediately picture it. It's you, normal-sized you, sitting in an enormous rocket chair. And in this bit, you're reading a story you've written, or your Edith Ann is.
Once upon a time, yesterday, I went out into the backyard to play, but I fell down instead. And I began to cry. And I went inside to tell Mama that I fell down, and she said, "How did it happen?" And I just shrugged my shoulders, because it was one of them accidents. You don't know how they happen. And then she said, "Stop crying, Edith. You are a big crybaby." And then my feelings was hurt. And she put a Band-Aid on my knee, but it didn't help, because you cannot put a Band-Aid on your feelings. And then Buster, my dog, came in. And then he went back out because he cannot stand to see me cry. And then He was thirsty, and his doggy bowl was in the kitchen, so I had to get up and let him in, and I limped to the door. Because my knee was weak, and it couldn't support me, and I fell down. Plus, I had dropped some butter on the floor at breakfast. And I just laid there, and I almost fainted. And then I came to. And then I got up and I started to write this story, but it was so sad I almost started to cry again, but I will not, because it will not do no good. And then Barbara will say I was a crybaby, which I can prove I am not by that second fall. The end.
I read somewhere something about you saying that you developed this character specifically because you wanted to do a kid character. Well, why did you want to do a kid character?
Well, as an actor, you just want to do a range of people, just like I did men later, and I've done teenagers, and I always was looking for another culture type to do, just because it makes your own repertoire richer. You can make more. You can comment on more things, and
there's something so sweet about her.
I know. I love Edith so much.
Do you find yourself? It's funny, like since I've had a kid, I've talked to people about this experience that you have that is cliched, which is seeing the world through a child's eyes, and I feel even stupid just saying it out loud into a microphone, but it is actual, and I wonder if you ever had that experience with this character, that because you were writing for and performing this character, you sort of had an opportunity to see the world in an alternate way.
Well, I so much used my own life. I used my baby brother, and then I just put Edith in the middle. I made an older sister so that I used all the stuff that had occurred between my brother and me as an older sister and a baby brother. And then Edith, she did to the baby brother what I did, and the older sister did to Edith what I did also. Wait, it's all cockeyed, but nonetheless, Edith was in the middle.
No, we're on it. Yeah, we're on board.
And I used all this stuff with my dad, and then of course that's the first thing I worked on with Jane.
So that's what I was about to ask you.
Was my Edith album, because Jane had written first thing she'd ever written that was material, because she wanted to be a songwriter, and she'd written a long song. Kind of like, now they do songs like American Pie, and they make a very long form song, and she'd written this song about a kid in Harlem, and her it called Traffic Jam of Life, and her agent at that time said, why don't you turn it into a screenplay for television, because a lot of stuff they were buying for after school.
Yeah, after school specials.
On CBS, right. And she wrote JT, and it got so much critical attention that they ran it every year for like 25 years at Holiday. And I saw it during one of those runs, and it was so wonderful in terms of this kid. And so it was tender and edgy and sad and funny, and every word was, every sentence, it was like an aphorism almost, and yet was totally naturalistic, totally moved character and plot, and was just essenced. And it's always what I looked for in a monologue. How can you create a culture type in 3 or 4 minutes and say something and fill it and be entertaining and contentful at the same time?
It's interesting to me that you say that, because I think for most comics, and I know a lot of comics, many comics have been on the show, their goal is to get as many laughs as they can. And they have, not that they don't have other vision for it, or they don't want to have social commentary, or they don't want to whatever, but number one on the list is always most powerful laughs. And that was like 5th on the list of things that you just said that you wanted to bring Jane Wagner into your life for. And it's not something that you've talked about in terms of creating your characters when we've talked just now.
Well, you have to be entertaining, even if it's a tragedy. You have to somehow create the essence in such a way that people are interested, or they're drawn in. So, with laughs are not the first objective. That's true. But if you hit it right, it will be funny, or it will have enough humor in it that it's entertaining on that level. And I watched you laughing. You laughed at the silly stuff.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not funny.
No, I'm saying but you laugh at, like a broad audience might not really laugh at, like in the Rubber Freak, you were saying like an especially good tune I twanged. I mean, that's just kind of ridiculous, wonderfully ridiculous. And so I don't even know where I'm going with this, but Jane is a wonderful writer. I mean, extraordinary writer. And and I'm kind of a potchkier, and I'll work on it and pitch and work on it and do something, get up and try it. And she always brought a much higher verbal level to the pieces that I began to do later, like The Search and the 2 Broadway shows we did. And
the two of you have been together romantically since the beginning of the 70s, which is like 40-some years now.
It'll be 42 years, March 31st.
Which is amazing. Congratulations. And I wonder if it was weird for you, especially in the 70s and into the 80s, that here you were working with this woman and living with her and like going to meetings together and whatever, just like living your life in many ways, like, just as you would. But at the same time, it was just so not a topic of conversation that 2 women would be together, that you were in a funny way also closeted almost by circumstance.
To some extent, because of the culture and the time of it, and but not with anybody we knew. But we were doing specials around that time too at CBS and ABC, and I'd even have writers who were good friends of ours who worked with us every day. And one of them said to me one morning, maybe you and Jane should come to work in different cars. And I said, well, no, we're not going to do that. And she said, well, people are talking. And I said, well, they just have to talk. It's not like I was afraid of it. I was more protective of my mother, who was more Christian and fundamentalist, because while my mother could tolerate the existence of us, my brother and me, I don't know that there's a short story by Marcella May called "State of Grace," and in it's so true of so many humans. Then this little guy who's very pious and he gets a halo before he dies. And his wife is just horrified because it makes them conspicuous. And she says, and the writer says, she preferred the approval of her concierge over her creator. And so I'm just saying that that kind of thing always, I knew it was hard for my mother because her family, that generation, my generation, my cousins and everything, the offspring of all those aunts and uncles, they're much more liberally minded. But that older generation, my mother died at 91. That was 8 years ago. So all of our relatives, and it's Southern too, that whole Southern life, and so much of it is Bible-based. It's very difficult for them to have a broader view of anything.
Did you and Jane ever discuss whether at some point you should come out in a big deal type way and become celebrity lesbians?
Well, this is old news. I hate, but I'll tell it. It was always there lurking in the background. People were interested, but particularly in the 70s, I think journalists tried to protect you, especially if they had regard for you. As artists or something, they were just like I was like in '75. We got a phone call. We were working on one of our albums actually, and Time wanted to do a cover story on being gay, and they asked my publicist if I would take the cover of Time and come out in that big way. See, Ellen didn't come out till 20 years later in 95, and even that was tough on her. So 75, I was more like, it wasn't because I was doing anything particularly that they were going to exploit. It was just me being gay is what they were going to exploit in our relationship. So I was torn because I thought it was important politically in some ways. But I also was a little offended on artistic level that I would trade the cover for my personal life, And instead, we put a piece on the album, which was the header. The album was about being famous. It was called Modern Scream, and I was supposed to be being interviewed by a magazine interviewer. And at one point, and I had just done Nashville, and she interviews me about what was it like, Lily, what was it like to see yourself on the big screen making love to a man? And I said, I've seen these women all my life. I know how they walk. I know how they talk. And we did a flip actually on all the interviews that Cliff Gorman had done for Boys in the Band because he was straight. And it was risky for him to take that role in terms of the audience. And we just flipped his interviews, basically. I hate to tell that to Cliff now. But... And Vito Russo was a great friend of mine who was a gay activist and journalist who's now died. And when we called Vito, we all talked about it, and we thought that was a good way to answer Time magazine to put it on the album. Of course, nobody ever said a damn word about it or anything, and it was pretty funny. Yeah. But that's been the story of my life. It's just like something else. Oh, like when I hitchhiked to Detroit, to Chicago, the other kids got expelled, and they just overlooked me.
You're listening to Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My guest is Lily Tomlin. She's one of the greatest American comics ever. We taped this interview in 2013.
I want to fast forward to the past couple of years real quick. I was so happy when you showed up on one of my favorite shows.
Oh, me too.
Eastbound and Down.
Yeah.
And you played Kenny Powers, the protagonist's mom. And Kenny Powers, the main character of Eastbound and Down, for folks who haven't seen it, is a sort of disgraced former Major League Baseball player, a man with boundless self-regard. I mean, insane self-regard and a majestic mullet and just a very vulgar way of being in the world and a little bit of sweetness in the very center of his heart. And you played his mother, the place where he came from. We have a little scene. I think this might be the first scene that we see you on the show. You're bowling with your friend who is your bowling partner here.
So why don't you decide, Tammy? You want me to win by points or disqualifications?
Well, whatever. I've got more important in my life than arguing with your dumb ass. My famous baseball player's son is coming for a visit with his new baby.
And would this be the son that got busted doing steroids and had that prostitution scandal?
What I like about that character
But I gave her a good punch, didn't I?
Yeah, you sure did.
Sucker punched her.
What I like about that character is because you're the mother of this human nightmare, Kenny Powers, you get to do two things at the same time. In a way, it's similar to what you do in Admission, although the morality of it maybe is different. But you get to be maternal and loving and just really sweet and human. And then you also just get to be completely ridiculous, like completely outrageous, punch people, like just whatever.
Well, for my boy.
Yeah.
I have to defend my son.
Had you seen the show when the part came along?
Well, here's the thing. I'm embarrassed to say I didn't even know about the show. And when I got the bid, I watched the first 2 years, and I just fell in love with, Danny McBride and that character. And so I was just delighted. I had so much damn fun doing that show, and I keep hoping I thought they were going to do a fourth season. I was hoping that I would get to do another stint as his mother. Because it's really fun,
I can only imagine, and I imagine that.
And they're fun to work with. Those guys, they're really fun.
I imagine that that there's something similar in your role in Admission, which is your character in Admission is a mom, so you get to do some mom stuff, like you get to show some love and be kind, but you also get to just be outrageous.
A little bit, yeah. Well, for me, taking that role, I loved that role when it was offered to me because I love, someone at that point in her life, a feminist my age, who was notable at some point, wrote a notable book. celebrated. And then, of course, that fame withers a bit. Time moves on, decades pass, and she's created this mythology around herself because she was so idealistic and so committed to the feminist doctrine. And she's even imposed it on her daughter and created this wedge between them. So this overlay of admission for everybody in the play was so important. You know, the slug line even is let someone in.
Have you, 40 years on from the peak of your idealism, when you were, turning down laughing and stuff like that,
and phone commercials?
Yeah. How do you regard that you as the you that you are now?
Well, I probably I don't regret that. I mean, that was acted. That's totally authentic. I acted out of, I burst in when I heard that they'd offered me a lot of money to do phone company commercials. I burst into tears because I thought that totally negated me as a satirist or as anybody making a comment on anything. I thought they think that money that I'll, so it was never a question. I didn't have to suffer over it or turmoil. Oh God, I want the money, but I had no trouble turning it down at that moment. Whether I would have taken it later in life, I can't be sure because it hasn't been offered. But I even went so far as to do that special Lily sold out about going to Vegas for the money because...
Is that the one where you get fired out of the cannon?
Yeah, right. So, and I do finally take it. I convinced myself I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for political reasons. What better place to do a piece? I'm going to do my 7 Ages of a Woman as my nightclub act. And, of course, I totally corrupted into a big Vegas act like Anne Margaret or Cher.
There's one thing that I feel like I can't let the interview pass without discussing, and I feel a little bit ridiculous because I have let the interview pass without discussing, for example, your Oscar-nominated role in Nashville. But there is, some years ago, this video clip of you having a disagreement with director David O. Russell
sure.
on the set of I Heart Huckabees was released on the internet. It was not the first public conflict with director David O. Russell. Brilliant director.
Brilliant, and
David
I love
O. Russell.
him.
I'm gonna play a little bit of it.
Can you play the language?
Well, we'll beep it out or
okay.
Whatever.
That's why we spent 5 or 6 hours doing something else. No! Damn it! You it up, damn you! Now get straight on and help. If you can't help them, help me.
So what was going on? This was totally amazing to me. I've loved all of David O. Russell's movies and all of your work. And David O. Russell has a reputation for unusual methods, which he burnished in the course of making this film. What was going on?
Oh, well, I was... we were doing a scene in a car that later didn't make it into the movie because it kind of hadn't... It was... The movie, he's a very mercurial, wonderful, inspired guy. And... during the making of that movie, he was in the habit of lying on a chaise, sometimes in his shorts, his boxer shorts, with a megaphone yelling at us, to do this or do that. And it was hot, and we'd been in the car for all day before lunch, and nothing was going right. It was just all this and that and whatever. Isabelle Huppert and Dustin and Hoffman and I were in the front seat, and Naomi Watts and Mark Wahlberg were in the back seat, and I was completely lost. So at lunch I said to David, let's look at the video and tell me what's working in this scene, because everybody was playing it differently. And Dustin had turned to me at one point and he said, "I'm going to play this like Stan Laurel."
Well, it was a movie with a mixed tone.
It was.
If it had a weakness,
and I adored. Oh, I didn't think it had a weakness at all. I love the movie so much, but on this particular day. And then I barely got. Then all my coverage had not been covered. I was just peripheral all that morning. So I had a good chance to find out what would work if he would help me. And as soon as I started speaking on my cue, he started yelling at me, saying, "Come on, Tomlin." I don't know what he was saying. He was berating me about something, and I just flipped out on the first go round.
Would you go back and do another movie with David Russell if he gave you the chance?
Yes, absolutely. We made up 2 minutes later. I mean, it's not like anything. I mean, we're tempered. We were frazzled and hot-tempered, and it was a hot day. And, when it happened, I was doing an interview with the Miami Herald in the morning, and they said, "What do you think about the YouTube video?" And I said, "Well, I don't know," because it was 4 years after the movie. I said, "What is it?" And I knew that the video existed because I'd heard agents had looked at it over the years. So then the guy said, he said it's from Huckabees, and I said, well, is it the car or is it the office? And he said both of them.
Well, it's like one of the all-time great things. I don't know if you ever heard that sound, that video of or that audio recording of Paul Anka yelling at his band, and he says, "Oh, I'm going to slice, and when I slice like a f***ing hammer."
No, but we're so goofy and so embarrassed. And I said, I'm sure David, whatever the video, because I had not seen it. I said, well, whatever it is, what can I say about it? I did it. There's nothing more to say. And I said, I imagine David and I are both a little chagrined that it got caught on tape and then distributed.
Well, Lily, I've taken up far too much of your time, but thank you so much for joining me on Bullseye.
Thank you. Well, I enjoyed it too, but God knows what I've said.
Lily Tomlin from 2013. Catch her on Netflix's Grace and Frankie if you haven't already seen it. She and Jane Fonda are both fantastic in it. She's also still doing live shows. We'll have a link to her upcoming dates on our website. Just go to the Bullseye page on MaximumFun.org. And if you're wondering, and I know you are, yes, when she came to see us, Lily Tomlin folded herself into our children's outside of a supermarket rocket ship ride and demanded that we plug it in. It was fantastic.